I think we need a special counsel to investigate the Fusion GPS episode between the Democratic Party, Mr. Steele, and Russian operatives. I think we need a special counsel to investigate the Uranium One episode where thousands of dollars were given to the Clinton Global Fund and to former President Bill Clinton from groups tied to Russia. We need a special counsel because Mueller can't do this.
Wow, that's a mouthful there. Senator Lindsey Graham now calling on that to investigate the DNC, the Clinton team, Bill and Hillary Clinton's ties to Russia, and just about everything else in that ball of wax. Judge Anna Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. How you doing, boss?
Good morning, Bill.
Morning to you. You've argued for some time now that Hillary Clinton should be investigated.
I've argued for some time that Hillary Clinton should be indicted. I mean, when the president fired Jim Comey, the stated reason was he dropped the ball on Hillary Clinton. Well, if he dropped the ball on Hillary Clinton, then the Justice Department should pick up that ball. That is, take the evidence that the FBI amassed against her of espionage, the failure to secure state secrets, bring it to a grand jury and see if the grand jury will indict. Now, following up on what Senator Graham just said, we have evidence of potential bribery. The delivery of, you ready for this number? $148 million in bundled donations to the Clinton Foundation, and the giving of $500,000 to Bill Clinton to give a speech in Moscow at the same time that Mrs. Clinton, with 8 others in the government, had to decide whether or not this company called Uranium One could purchase 25% of a uranium mine in Utah. Significance? Uranium One is owned by the Kremlin. Yeah. Only Mrs. Clinton and others in the government could have authorized it. Is there a connection between $148 million in her family foundation and $500,000 in her husband's bank account and her decision to authorize this? That is worthy of a Justice Department investigation, but not an independent counsel. The Justice Department itself can do this. We should not have a proliferation of independent counsels. We only have an independent counsel when the Justice Department can't do its work because there's a conflict.
When Alan Dershowitz comes on our program, he says the law's gotten carried away with these independent counsels.
It's not
because it can go in any one of 100 different directions.
Okay.
Is he right about that?
I do agree with him. There was a statute that provided for judges to appoint an independent counsel. That statute expired and it was never renewed. But when the statute was challenged, the Supreme Court upheld it and said there are times when the Justice Department has such a conflict, there's no way to do it but an independent counsel. So after the statute expired, Congress picked up on what the Supreme Court said and wrote a rule in the Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure which says when the Attorney General or his designee see a conflict, they should appoint an independent counsel. A conflict means you have divided loyalties. No conflict, no independent counsel. The Justice Department should do its job and not kick the ball to an independent counsel.
More from Lindsey Graham on Russia's involvement here with James Comey. He dropped this one yesterday.
It would be wrong to have the Russians help the Trump campaign or the or Hillary Clinton's campaign. And here's what nobody talks about. The Russians manipulated Comey in getting involved into the election. It was Russian information that Comey used to jump into the middle of the 2016 election, not a meeting between Lynch and President Clinton on the tarmac.
Is he right? And is this where this story is headed?
I don't know what Senator Graham knows and which he says it was Russian information. What, in my view, caused Jim Comey, quite improperly, in my view, to jump into the 2016 campaign was his decision on July 5th, 2016, not to indict Mrs. Clinton and then to list all the evidence against her.
But I thought he was referring to the Russian dossier.
Well, the Russian dossier, as far as I know, was not acted upon by the FBI until after the election, when Jim Comey decided to reveal it to the president-elect, so he didn't hear about it in the news first.
And quickly, this is a big topic, but I want to get it on. The Paradise Papers, what do they tell us, and what's important?
They tell us that there's no secrecy or privacy in the world anymore, even when you're very rich and you pay a lot of money for secrecy and privacy. We also need to know that there is no crime in putting your funds in an offshore account as long as you report the income on those funds to the IRS. You need to self-report because those banks in those tax havens will honor privacy and secrecy. They will not report it to the IRS. It's up to you to report it.
Wilbur Ross is on screen. He's saying he's got nothing to do with this.
Well, the Wilbur Ross allegation is a little different. The allegation with Wilbur Ross is that he invested in a company that owns ships, and the ships transported fuel natural gas owned by the Kremlin. Now, when you invest in a company, are you obliged to know who the company's clients are? Do you have to report that to the government? Answer no. So there's a little bit of a political kerfuffle here. He has nothing to worry about legally from what we saw this morning.
The Queen's involved in these papers, right? The Paradise Papers,
yes.
The Queen.
He's now a Fox News contributor, and Zach McCannis, former senior DNC advisor, who also worked on the Clinton campaign. Zach, so let me go to you first and get your reaction to all of this.
I mean, look, I think that it is really unfortunate that it's coming, that this book is being put out right before the election. I mean, I was one of the Clinton campaign staffers that wrote a letter that talked about how that this was not the campaign that we recognize. Really, most anything that is displayed in the book. So I think it is just generally pretty unfortunate. There are large swaths of the book that have been debunked. Just
what do you think her
basic
motivation
fact checks.
is? Why would she lie in her book?
Look, I mean, I can't speak to her motivation. Donna Brazile is a friend, and I like her very much. But I do think that this was incredibly unfortunate timing and choice to do this, especially right before the election.
But what? So you have no guess as to why? Why you're saying that she's not telling the truth?
I'm saying that I think that it made for a good book. But
she said she was disrespected by men on the campaign. She said that they would look at her and nod but not listen to her. He was so obsessed, basically, she said, with his data. And, basically they blew it. They blew the campaign. So she's saying, look, wake up, folks, because nobody listened to me and I knew what we should have been doing.
I'm certainly not going to sit here and diminish her experience on the campaign. What I can say is, though, a member of that campaign, that is certainly not the campaign that I recognize. And I think it is a little, as I said, I think it is unfortunate that this is what Democrats or some Democrats are talking about going into the election.
Jason, what do you think?
Look, it is pretty stunning, the gravity of it. Look, she was very revered. I mean, she has decades with the Democratic Party and revered enough to make her the chairman of the party. So you've got to
helped him out in a pretty tough time, too.
She came in and stepped in a very, very difficult time. I think the most serious allegation is this joint fundraising agreement. That may have been actually money laundering. I think one of her frustrations is she couldn't bring in impartial staff, that Clinton had signed this document basically saying, I'll help you raise money, but then you have to hire my people. Well, there's a reason why there are campaign contribution limits. You can't do that. That's called money laundering. And I think there's a real legal liability that she...
Zach's shaking his head. Why, Zach?
No, I mean, first off, the joint fundraising agreements are incredibly common. Donald Trump had one.
Until after the nominee is picked, though.
No, that's not true. Donald Trump had one before he was the nominee.
You can't bypass that and put in your own people.
Well, first off, that has nothing to do with the actual agreement. There was a memorandum of understanding that stated, and I will quote, all activities performed under this agreement will be focused exclusively on preparations for the general election and not the Democratic primary. This is an agreement. This is an agreement that was extended to the Bernie Sanders campaign. They said that if they raised money into the DNC, that they could have a say in how that money was spent. They decided not to do that, but they did decide to complain about it afterward.
All right, guys, I want to get your thoughts on this other issue today of the Comey draft statement. Back on May the 2nd, 2016, he drafted a statement in the investigation of Hillary Clinton saying that there was evidence to support a conclusion that Secretary Clinton and others used the private email server in a manner that was grossly negligent with respect to the handling of classified material. He then came out on July 5th and used this phrase. Watch.
There is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
So, Jason, why did grossly negligent become extremely careless, and what difference does it make?
Well, within the statute, you don't have to prove intent. But that's where the FBI director continued to go, is to say, well, we couldn't prove the intent. What's in the statute is gross negligence. So that begs the other question is, if that was in the original statement, why did you take it out? And the other huge question I have is, why were you drafting a statement weeks before you've even interviewed what ended up being nearly 16 people, including the primary suspect herself, Hillary Clinton? How do you, if a judge had started to write his opinion before the trial was over, wouldn't we all look suspiciously at that and say, what in the world are you doing?
I got to go. I'm going to give Zach one very quick response?
I think you guys got to pick your attack on James Comey. First, it was that he was too hard on Hillary Clinton, and that's why he needed to be fired. But now it was that he was too easy on Hillary Clinton. You guys got to pick one of your nonsense attack lines.
There's no Democrat that would vote to reconfirm Jim Comey. It should be one thing.
You know what? Let me just say this. What we're talking about is very specific here, and it is the statute language, grossly negligent. So it's a very legitimate question to say, why would that language be removed from the statement several months later? It's a perfectly legitimate question to ask of the Attorney General as he went, head of the FBI as he went through it.
It is simply an attempt to undermine the FBI at a time when they are bringing down indictments on the
black and white
It's just a look at the language and a question why.
And it's a hypocritical attack given the way that the people were attacking James Comey.
I don't know why anyone would be afraid to ask questions about why the FBI director would change his language on something like that. It's a perfectly legitimate discussion. Thank you very much, you guys. Good to see you both.
A key question for congressional investigators. Did Hillary Clinton give 20% of the United States supply of uranium to Russia for donations to the Clinton Foundation? And it flows out of the sale in 2010 of this company, Uranium One, which controlled about a fifth of America's uranium, to a Russian firm called Rosatom. By law, even though Uranium One was a Canadian firm, the U.S. part of this deal had to be approved by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., which is comprised of 9 agencies, including the State Department. And at that time, Hillary Clinton was the boss there. Anderson?
So, I mean, a lot of this was looked at during the campaign. Why is it coming up back now again? I mean, there were also all the donations to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. It was all talked about before. But the Hill newspaper, which reports on a lot of things with the government here, came out with a report showing the FBI was investigating a subsidiary of Rosatom for possible racketeering, money laundering, bribes, all aimed at giving the Russian government more influence over the U.S. nuclear industry while this deal was being approved. So some members of Congress want to know why they weren't told about all of this. And furthermore, the Hill says the Russians were channeling millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation at the same time, raising the question, especially for some Republicans, did Hillary Clinton help this deal along in any fashion? Her staff, people who work there, say emphatically no. She had nothing to do with approving the uranium deal. It was handled at the staff level, and Clinton herself calls the allegations baloney.